As the story begins, we get a glimpse of our main protagonist's daily routine. At 7 a.m., he did a 10 kilometers run. At 12 p.m., head strikes 500 times. At 5 p.m., big 3 exercises of 10 reps. And for the sake of repeating this whole routine for 14 days, he decides to resign from his company. Someone had asked him if he had suddenly gone crazy, and he believed maybe it would have been better for him if he had gone crazy. However, a screen in front of him was telling him that the entire world was about to end soon, and the countdown on that timer finally reached 0. The scene then switches over to 15 days ago, and everyone receives a notification on their mobile phones that a monster had appeared, and the citizens were instructed to evacuate immediately. People could not comprehend what the hell was happening while disaster alerts kept on coming one after another, stating that the monsters really have appeared and on multiple locations, that is. Even on social media, a guy started live streaming a monster and was terrified, but still, for the views, he considered going a little closer to it since he came all the way there. Suddenly, the whole chat starts spamming behind you, and he sees that the monster was right behind him and screams loudly. Our hero was also left surprised by that, and he wondered why that video looked so realistic. On top of that, they were also receiving the disaster alert text messages one after another, and he just could not help but wonder what on earth was happening. By the way, his name was Lee Hoyeon, and he was 29 years old. It was already hard enough to make a living in the city, but now they were talking about monsters and whatnot, and he was not going to believe something like that since there had been way too many fake videos like that recently. However, right in front of him, he then sees a monster lying on the ground. He was dumbfounded and could not understand why there was a monster right in front of him. The situation itself was getting kinda scary, so he decided to run for now. But then that monster starts trying to act all cute, and he wondered if it was asking him to help it. Even though it was trying to act cute and ask for help, it was still looking too scary, and above all, he was just a human, and that creature was a monster. He was not someone nice enough to be able to show compassion to a monster, and although he felt bad about it, he just could not help a monster even if it was looking at him with those eyes. But then, the monster pulls out its secret card and starts crying while showing him a picture of its family which left him frozen. Ultimately, he ended up helping a monster, and he even got a gift from it. But he still could not understand what was this silver goblin's pill that the system was telling him, and he contemplated if this was something like a hologram. The system stated that the pill could be consumed, but he did not want to eat something so suspicious when all of a sudden, an urgent news gets broadcasted on the TV. Unknown large buildings had appeared all over the world, and these buildings looked somewhat like towers. They had lost all contact with the U.S. Army that went inside those towers as well. Considering the appearance of monsters in the unknown towers, everyone wondered if the apocalypse really had started. As Lee was shocked to see that news, suddenly, a huge explosion occurred in the city. Everyone was running for their life, and when they finally turned back to look, a massive tower had appeared out of nowhere. The news also immediately reported that a huge tower had just appeared in Korea. Meanwhile, Lee looked at that tower and clenched his fist. He did not know if the decision he was making was correct or not, but still, he eats that silver goblin's pill since he knew very well that this was the only time he would be able to do something as crazy as this. The moment he ate that pill, he suddenly felt his entire body transcending, and weird notifications started popping up in front of him, telling him that he had obtained Sage's status window, which would provide the guide with the highest rate of survival in his current situation. Just then, a book materialized in front of him, and when he opened that book, the guide said that the door to the end of days was opening soon. It specified the time that was left until the end of days and recommended some quests to prepare himself for the end, which consisted of strength exercises, cardio exercises, and learning kendo. So he started following the recommendation of the guide and gave up on everything else for 15 days to focus on just exercising. However, when the door of the end finally opened, he found himself in an entirely new place and just wondered if that was actually the end. It was kinda different from what he had imagined, but just then he notices a sword lying right beside him. The status window shows that the game had started and they were starting off with the tutorial. Based on the analysis of the data, he was to be given the most suitable class, and that was the combat swordsman. He had no idea what was happening, and he was just shocked to see so many screens suddenly appearing in front of him. Nonetheless, he quickly adapts and grabs the sword while wondering if this means that things were really starting from now on. After reading the instructions provided on the screen, he understood that to clear this, he had to either survive in this forest for 60 minutes or to escape from an exit that was in there somewhere. Since it was called the tutorial, he guessed that it should be giving him time to get used to the game before it starts. But then the sage's status window opens up and the guide tells him that he should use all 60 minutes of the tutorial and kill as many monsters as possible because the second objective would hinder his growth and was not recommended. After seeing that he could use the status window there too, he started to think that it must have recommended him to exercise because it knew that this situation would occur. Based on what the guide said, he now had to hunt the monsters, and to do that, it was best to not choose to run away from the forest. With all that out of the way, the tutorial finally starts, and all of a sudden, a creature randomly appears in front of him. It was a level 1 one-horned raccoon, and it was actually cuter than he had thought it would be. But then suddenly, it shows its monstrous side and immediately starts attacking. However, Lee slashes it down with ease using his basic swordsmanship skill, and after successfully killing it, he obtains some EXP for that. Seeing that it dies to a strike from basic swordsmanship, he felt that it was pretty weak and guessed that maybe it was because it was a tutorial monster. However, basic swordsmanship used 2 MP, and he only had 10 MP in total, so he could only use basic swordsmanship 5 times. That meant that he needed to preserve as much MP as he could while hunting. And with that in mind, he continued slashing monsters one after another, while also combining it with basic swordsmanship, and the need occurred. As he continued to obtain EXP, he reached level 2, and he also recovered HP and MP from that. The window also explains to him that he obtains points every time he levels up, and he could use those to increase his stats. However, that specific window suddenly starts to crumble, and the system automatically adjusts his level, making him level 1 once again. The phenomenon was the weight of knowledge, and since he had the sage's status window, he was going to level up slower as compared to other players. Seeing that there was a penalty for having the sage's status window, he could not believe that the level he gained was just taken away from him, and it just made him really annoyed as he wondered when exactly could he level up then. It was a really ridiculous handicap, and he opened up his status window, but then he noticed that there was something weird on that screen. Even though he did not level up, he still had the skill points, and it made him realize that this was not really a penalty, it was actually an overpowered bug-like ability. As he continued slashing down monsters one after another, he gained a ton of EXP, but his level always got readjusted, and he kept falling back to level 1, while he, on the other hand, was getting excited to see that since the remaining skill points were still going up. He knew that the more he levels up, the more EXP he would need to earn for the next one. Therefore, it was easier to raise his stats like this than to level up the normal way. He then decides to try raising his stats, and he notices that he had 4 choices. He believed that strength and agility would be the best choices for a combat swordsman because strength would allow for stronger attacks while agility would increase his speed and reflexes. However, the stat that he actually needed the most right now was sensitivity, and he increased it by 4. Later, as he continued to defeat the level 1 one-horned raccoon, he started to think that the one-horned raccoon was not as strong as one would expect from a tutorial monster since he was able to defeat them easily even with the default stats. The guide had told him to utilize the entire 60-minute tutorial to kill as many monsters as possible. However, the main problem for him was that he did not know how many one-horned raccoons he could find within the given time as a horde of raccoons lay dead in front of him. But then it had gotten much easier to find the raccoons now that he had a higher sensitivity stat, and he felt like he could sense a kind of ki with sensitivity 22. Just then, he feels something menacing, and a message appears saying that a hidden quest was being activated as he had defeated all monsters. A big monstrous one-horned raccoon appears right behind him, and he was tasked to defeat that level 2 one-horned raccoon alpha. It quickly jumps on him to attack him, and Lee manages to dodge it on time, but he was just shocked to see how fast it was and wondered if that rhino-like monster was the boss monster. First up, he calms himself down as he knew that it was different from the other one-horned raccoons, and as it started charging towards him, he quickly counters it with his sword and lands a clean strike. He successfully defeated the boss one-horned raccoon alpha, and the system informs him that he had cleared the hidden quest for which he also received some gold. He managed to defeat it so easily since he was level 7 after all, even though he was stuck on level 1 on the system. And as he successfully completed the tutorial, he thinks how he did not expect the hour to feel so long. Nonetheless, it was finally over. But then, all of a sudden, he found himself in an entirely different location with a group of people around him. Someone on the speaker welcomes them all and informs them that they have successfully completed the tutorial. The place they were at was the lobby of the tower, and they were currently in the C-2567 region. Lee had no idea what was going on, but he noticed that there were 14 men and 11 women, and judging by their reactions, he wondered if they also finished the tutorial and were sent there. Everyone around him was panicking, which made sense actually since the entire world changed in just a day after all, and if he had not known that the world was going to end beforehand, he was sure he would probably be panicking just like them. However, he pulls himself together as he needed to make it out of there alive. A woman questions what this place was, and then someone tells her that this was the Tower of the End. When she turns to see who said that, a rabbit-like creature had appeared out of nowhere and introduces itself as the cutie of the tower and the lower floor manager, Kum, having a level of 55. Most were just shocked to see something like that there, while others questioned him if it was him who brought them there, while he just thought to himself that this was a pretty normal response. But then Lee steps up and asks if this really was the end of the world, then what exactly were they supposed to do now, which immediately caught his attention. He compliments him that was a great question and proceeds to explain that all of the 22 players present there would be participating in a game with their lives at stake, and it just left everyone in shock. All humans were currently in this tower right now, and they were going to have to work together for each mission on each floor to climb the tower. Lee then questions if they could go back to their normal lives once they make it to the top of the tower, and the rabbit simply replies that he also did not know about that. Confused, he asks him what was the point of climbing the tower then, and the rabbit questions him back if there really was a need to search for meaning in things. Only death awaited those who did not climb the tower, and he further informed them that quite a lot of people had already died in the tutorial, which immediately sent chills down his spine and started to think why did he not consider that. He knew that it was just a tutorial, but it made perfect sense that there must be a lot of people who could not even manage that. Suddenly, he remembered someone and started to get worried while Kum openly asked them if anyone there was willing to try and kill him. He tells them that he needed to die in order to get home and that there was also a special reward for the one who helps him, but Lee wondered if this was some sort of trap. He did not look strong on the outside, but he knew very well that there was no way he could win against a level 55, so he decides to just stand back and watch, but then all of a sudden, the status window opens up, and the guide tells him that he should help the lower floor manager Kum get home. After reading that, he started to think if that meant it was actually okay to attack the rabbit. It never hurt until now to listen to what the guide told him, however he was just not sure if it was worth doing something so conspicuous. He could not decide what he should do when suddenly, a man steps up and says that he would do it. Since Kum wanted to die so badly, he was ready to kill him, while Lee on the other hand realized that he was too late. The man brings out his sword and tells him that he would kill him as painfully as he could, and just as he was about to swing his sword at him, he suddenly punches him in the face so hard that his blood flies all the way across the walls. In an entirely new physical form, he states that he accidentally counterattacked while that man's laid on the ground without his head. Everyone started screaming and started running away, while Lee just stood there in shock, thinking to himself, what if it had been him who volunteered? Kum reverts back to its previous form and tries to explain to everyone that it was just a mistake, and while the status window still repeated the same message, he once again asks them if there were any other volunteers, which left Lee questioning if the guide lied to him. While he was in doubt about what the guide had suggested him to do, suddenly, the sage's status window triggers, and it shows him the two powers that he had because of the status window. One was of course the guide, and the other one was called Sage's Eye. It said that whenever it gets triggered, he would be able to look at the status window of other people, and he was just surprised to see that there was another ability besides Sage's status window. But more importantly, he could not understand why this was appearing all of a sudden. Just then, he looked at Kum, and he finally realized what was actually going on. As Kum continued to try to act all cute, Lee steps up and says that he would help him out as he was now sure that the guide was not lying. Kum reminds him that he was just a level 1 player, but Lee asks him if his level was really that important when what he was doing was a good deed, and he also agreed with him. So he opens his arms and asks him to send him home quickly. But just then, a girl tries to stop him and says that this was too dangerous since they just saw someone die and everyone else agreed as well. However, he assures her that it was fine because he had a plan. With that said, he was ready to show them something exciting, and Kum transforms into his muscular form and quickly charges at him to attack him. Lee, on the other hand, contemplates that there was something strange about what Kumkum said earlier. He was certain that there were 25 people in that space. However, Kumkum said 24. He wondered if that was just a mistake, but he was also sure that that could not be the case because of the horror of facing a level 55 monster and the fear that it could kill them. He believed that all of that was intentional. Kumkum landed a strike right at his face, and everyone screamed in shock. However, his fist passed right through his head, and as Lee slashed him in half with his sword, he understood the real reason why Kumkum said that was because there were only 24 people in there to begin with. Suddenly, the dead body of that man who attacked him first also started to disappear, and it turned out that it was a human hologram made by Kumkum. In fact, Kumkum's status window itself stated that it was just a hologram which disappears when damage was inflicted, and it was not his true form. In its dying breath, the hologram hoped that may the odds be ever in the favor for those who had courage, and it just disappeared while Lee stood tall. The hologram dropped a marble, which was actually a stat point, and everyone was just shocked to see that it was just a hologram. They asked him how did he know about that, and he explains that coincidentally he saw the blood pass through Yizil, and her face and clothes should have been covered in blood because of the proximity. But that did not happen, and that's why he thought this was all a show. While in his mind, he thought that maybe it would have been better for him to make up an excuse instead. But then, a man comes up to him and argues that it would be a huge waste for him to have that stat point marble that just dropped because in the first place, he just got lucky. And if he had noticed that, he would have stepped up as well. This guy was a level 4 player named Kim Seon. Lee questions him what does he mean by saying that it would be a waste, and he comments that the fact that he was still level 1 when they already completed the tutorial must mean that he was either weak as hell or he simply could not kill anything, so he just ran away. He was sure that he was just going to die quickly, so for the sake of mankind, he gave him a chance to yield that marble to him. Lee, on the other hand, could not believe his arrogance and wondered if he was actually being serious. Nonetheless, he crushed that marble and claimed that one stat point for himself right in front of his face and states that yielding was not a hobby of his. Kim gets furious and says that he was for a bottom feeder. He was quite a greedy guy while also asking him if he was trying to save face because of his level. Meanwhile, speaking from experience, Lee knew that the wisest thing to do right now was to avoid people like him. However, he was not sure for how long he would be able to keep that up. Just then, an announcement is made informing everyone that from now on, their starting gold would be given out. They could use that gold in the shop, and additional gold would be given in accordance with the number of monsters they had hunted in the tutorial. Furthermore, it announces that in that area, the highest amount of starting gold the player had obtained was 7,400, and it left everyone stunned. Kim Seon and Kim Junsong, both level 4 players, had obtained 1,300 and 1,500 gold respectively. And they wondered who came in first, while it was very obvious that the person who received 7,400 gold and came in first was in fact our level 1 player, Lee. But of course, he did not plan to reveal it since one guy was already jealous of him for a mere stat point. There were 3 big things that they could do with the gold: buying things, leveling up their skills, or increasing their stats. Lee decided to first up adjust all his stats to 20, and after doing so, he was still left with 4,600 gold. Seon, on the other hand, was irritated because leveling up his skills was much more expensive for him. He further decides to level up his basic swordsmanship as well, and since he could not keep wearing his gym uniform, he bought himself a pair of clothes too. Just then, the girl from before, level 3 player, Chae Yizil, comes up to him and states that she would like to have some advice for him, and in response, he asks her why she was asking for advice from a level 1 player. She tells him that his level aside, she was very impressed by his bravery. He takes a quick look at her status window using the Sage's Eye and sees that she had 800 gold, but still, to test her honesty, he asks her how much gold she had currently had, and she answers truthfully. However, he needed to hide that he was using a cheat key, so he starts off by asking her if she likes exercising, to which she replies that she does not mind walking so. He tells her that in that case, her stamina stat was most likely not very good. He suggests to her that if she was lacking stamina, then she should invest in that since she can't even use the items for long despite the gold she spends on it, and she sincerely thanks him for the advice. Suddenly, another announcement was made, informing them that the first floor mission would commence soon, and they were required to create their own 3-man party. Players with no party were to be put into a random party, and for this task, they were given 30 minutes. He had already guessed that there would be a group mission. However, he was a bit surprised to see that they gave them one sooner than he had thought. Junsong suggests that since they could already see each other's levels, they should tell each other about their classes as well, and everyone started to reveal their classes. With the help of this, people started to create teams with the players they wanted to. Yizil asks him if he would like to team up with him, and with that, his first party member was Yizil Israel, since he did not really have a reason when a healer was asking to team up with him up front. However, everyone else's replies were the same, and they did not seem comfortable to join his team. Even though he had a healer, he guessed that maybe they were bothered by him, which was to be given since it was true that a level 1 combat swordsman was not very enticing. Since players who were level 4 were very relaxed, everyone had already made their parties. Just then, the announcer informs them that 30 minutes were up and incomplete parties were now to be filled randomly. With that said, the first floor mission commenced, and everyone got teleported to different locations. It turned out Sion was the one to join Lee's incomplete party, and obviously, he did not seem very happy about it. He himself was surprised to see that he was less popular than him even when he was level 4, and just looking at his irritated face, he wondered if it would even be possible to cooperate with a guy like him. However, he knew very well that since it had come to this, the problem was not if it was possible or not. He just needed to make it possible somehow in order to survive in that place. Their mission on the first floor was to annihilate the Kobold tribe, and they had a 12-hour time limit for that. Sion tells them not to get in his way as he would be the one to wipe out that Kobold tribe, but Lee tries to remind him that this was a team mission. However, that just makes him pissed, and he questions him why the hell does he have so much to say even when he is letting him ride on his coattails. He does not argue and simply states that he would try the ride on his coattails, and they will see how good that is while thinking to himself that he should just listen to him for now. Sion further comments that they were only going to ride his coattails anyway and tells him to get his act together when someone was about to kill him, while Lee sarcastically thanks him for his concern. Yizil, on the other hand, was simply worried and wondered if this party would really be okay since they absolutely needed to complete this mission without any trouble. As they kept moving forward through the forest, he noticed that there were indeed a lot of bugs since they were in the mountains, but then all of a sudden, he felt something was wrong. Yizil then comes up to him and states that kobold monsters must be strong, to which he replies that there is a chance that it was stronger than a one-horned raccoon. However, since they were still on level 1, he believed that it should be manageable. Nonetheless, he suggests they should still stay on their guard since this was the Tower of the End after all, and she agreed. Just then, a level 5 kobold appeared in front of them, and he was just shocked to see that that one was way too different than what he had imagined. Both of them quickly hide, and seeing that the monster was obviously stronger, Yizil asks him what they should do, and he suggests they should check the surroundings first because there could be more kobolds around. However, Seong comments that it was because he kept hiding like a damn coward he was still at level 1 as he landed a punch right in Kobold's face. The monster was still trying to hold out, so he continued smashing it, while Lee simply could not believe that he would just go in there all alone so brazenly as he had not expected him to be that stubborn. Yizil also decides to help him out, and thankfully he did not sense any other kobolds around yet either. Yizil backs Seong up by providing him a bit of strength and healing his HP, and Lee thought to himself that he was definitely bringing his levels worth though. With Yizil's help, he believed that he might even be able to take him down all alone. However, he could not understand why the damage dealt was so low compared to his strength, which left him wondering if he had some other weaknesses. Just then, the status window opens up, and the guide tells him that since kobolds were passive monsters, they would not attack unless provoked, which basically meant that Kim Seong stirred the hornet's nest for no reason. But still, he tries to be positive about it, and recalls that they needed to catch a few for research purposes anyway. Just then, he sees something, and it leaves him in complete shock. Meanwhile, Seong uses his level 1 stone fist to finally put an end to that kobold, but it dodges and he hits a tree instead, which accidentally falls down on another kobold who was actually a level 6 one, and it was quite pissed. Both of them started attacking him, and even he started to feel like he was in big trouble now, but more importantly, he was more mad that Lee was not doing anything and was not even helping him out. When he looked towards his direction, there was no one, and he thought if that loser actually ran away. But while he was distracted, a monster was just about to hit him. However, Yizil helps him out and saves him. But then, she loses her balance and falls to the ground while the other kobold is ready to attack her immediately. Suddenly, a fruit was thrown right above it, and Lee used his basic swordsmanship to cut through the fruit and land a strike on the kobold. The juices from the fruit fell down on it, and it just exploded along with the kobold. He successfully eliminated the level 6 kobold, while Yiziel and Sayong were simply stunned to see that. While they were in the forest earlier, he had noticed that when the bugs were eating all the fruit, they did not seem to touch any of these fruits, which left him wondering if something was off. He summons another poison apple from the inventory and finally understands what the guide meant when it told him to gather poison from the forest, since kobolds were vulnerable to poison. This poison apple was the key to the level 1 mission. Sayong was beyond pissed, while he, on the other hand, asked Yiziel if she was okay, and she said yes, thanks to him. He had not expected that another one would be drawn there because of the aggro, otherwise it would have been dangerous if he was a bit late. But she simply replies that even so, he came just on time, so thanks to him, they made it out. However, Sayong, who obviously looked mad, calls him out and tells him that he was just a damn freeloader because he was hiding somewhere in a corner when it was actually dangerous. And after he landed a few hits to those monsters, he just swooped in and stole the final hit. He continued to rant while he just stood there thinking to himself, what the hell was he yapping out, and wondered if he was a lunatic while he was walking away. But on a serious note, seeing how he was unable to read the room, he believed that Sayong was going to have an even harder time ahead. Later, they straight up raided the kobold village, and while Sayong was fighting them with his bare fists and was getting hit as well, Yiziel and Lee were easily eliminating the kobolds one after another, and it just pissed him off even more. He could not understand how they were doing it so easily while he was there getting absolutely bullied by the monsters. It started to hurt, and he just laid there, hoping for someone to help him out when suddenly, the 2 kobolds were taken out, and he was saved. Lee offers him a hand and asks him how the ride was since he took over that coattail ride in his place for a bit. All of a sudden, Sayong had huge respect for him, and he started calling him his big brother, which left both of them quite shocked, and with that, the 3 of them successfully cleared the level 1 mission. Later, when the 3 of them returned back to the lobby, Sayong could not believe what he had done. He called some level 2 newbie sir, and even agreed to serve him even though the only one he wanted to serve was his boss. It was over for him if this were to spread around, but he was also a man, and he just could not go back on his word. While he tried to figure out what to do, Lee just looked at him and wondered if he needed to shit or something. Yiziel then looks around and sees that nobody was there yet, which meant that they were the first ones there, and it also looked like they cleared the level faster than others because they luckily managed to find Kobold's weakness. Yiziel expresses that it was not blind luck, rather it was all thanks to his observation skills, because she herself never would have thought of using poison, and he, on the other hand, acts all humble and says that if it was not for their support, it would have been much harder because deep inside, he did feel like a fraud. Just then, portals started to open up, and the other parties were coming back too. He noticed that it was Kim Jun-song and Seo Chino's party and thought to himself that they must have found the poisonous apples as well, but he still wondered if the other parties would make it back fine. Later, when another party came back, it was just the 2 of them, and when Yiziel asked them what happened to their third person, they simply answered that it's just the 2 of them. The announcer informed everyone that the first level mission had been completed by all parties, but when Yiziel tried to tell them that there was still someone who had not come back yet, they announced that a total of 6 parties returned alive, while 8 players had failed to return. After hearing that, Lee also thought that even though he had expected that it would be hard for everyone to make it back alive, 8 dead already was a bit too much, and it just left him wondering how many more of them would die there before they make it up to the top. The calculations for the level 1 mission begin, and the parties who made it back alive as a whole, and the party that cleared that first level first was, in fact, Lee's party, and they received 1,000 gold each. Lee had gotten 2,000 gold for completing both the bonuses, but he felt that it was a bit lacking compared to the tutorial. Still, he understood that gold was a kind of insurance for his future survival, and therefore he needed to save as much as he could. But other parties, on the other hand, did not know which party got first, and as everyone started staring at him, he guessed that he would have to reveal it this time since the party that returned second already knew. However, just before he could tell them that it was them, Sayong shouts loudly that it was them and acts all proud, and tells them not to be sad since it was an obvious result. People could not believe that their party came first, and he starts questioning them if they were mad that he got first, while Lee just thought to himself if he already forgot the fact that he was beaten up by those kobolds. But nonetheless, he was fine with it because that lessened the attention on him. However, quite the contrary, everyone started staring at him even more and gossiped that he got first place, even though he was only level 2, and he got 2,000 gold from doing nothing and getting carried, which made him realize that that was not going to be the case. Yizil tried to explain to them that that's not what happened, but he stops her and tells her that it was okay since no one was going to listen anyway. He just had to show them. Just then, the level 8 player, Kim Jun-song, calms everyone down and reminds everyone that they need to focus on their survival. Seo Chino, another one of the highest players in the region, also agreed with him and stated that they must keep pushing on for the sake of the people who passed away. With that said, everyone pulls themselves together and gets fired up when, all of a sudden, the flames in the room turn from blue to red, and it leaves everyone confused. A warning was made, and it said that the survival rate of the first level of Region C2567 was below average, and because of that, a penalty mission was being put into place. People started to panic, and it further said that a death mission was going to begin soon for which they all must choose one candidate in their mind. The player with the most votes was going to carry out the death mission. A 5-minute timer started, and if someone did not choose anyone, they would automatically vote for themselves. In that situation, people realized what it meant to be voted there. The timer started and everyone was panicking, not knowing what to do, but then Yizil suggested everyone to vote for themselves, so in that case, no one would have to do the death mission. A man questions her, what if they all end up having to do it then? But that was not the time to be arguing, and the time was still ticking. Not knowing what to do, suddenly one of them points out to Lee, and he had already gotten a vote from Chuno, which was appearing above his head. No one had said that it was not anonymous, and even they knew that this was too cruel, but then Juno says that they do need to choose someone. Lee expresses that he did expect it, given the atmosphere, but he was also a bit taken aback because after all, he did not want to die either. Yizil still tries to convince everyone that it was not too late and they could all still vote for themselves while Lee votes Juno. However, he tells her that it won't work because Jachil had a point earlier, and they do not know if that would work. And more importantly, trust was already broken. As time ticked away, the votes above his head increased one by one, and he was sure that there was more than one reason for it. But to be honest, he knew very well that the biggest reason was that he was a low level. They had already lost the notion of society that the strong should protect the weak. Everyone's masks fell, and people started to reveal their true selves, and even said that he would have died anyway given his level. And as the timer ticked to 0, Seong also voted for him with a grin on his face, which was all a cruel reminder that the world of the end really was here. All votes had been cast, and the portal to the death mission was opening. As the portal opened up, Yizil felt bad for him, while Seong continued to laugh like a bastard and called himself a genius as all his problems would be solved if he was gone. The sacrificial lamb was chosen, and the altar was set up. With the faces of guilt and relief behind him, he had no choice but to climb the Calvary. Except at the top of the Calvary was not death. The sage's guide tells him that participating in the death mission was recommended because he had a high chance of clearing the mission, and at the top, a satisfactory reward awaited him. And so he entered the portal happily, to claim his delightful treat. The people left behind just sat there in silence when Jun-song comes up to Yisil and asks her if she was feeling all right. While it was short, they were still companions who had watched each other's backs, and he felt really regretful separating like this. Seong arrogantly states it was not regretful, and he got what he deserved. Jun-song questions him what that was supposed to mean, and he asks him back if he could not tell just by looking at that person's level. All he did was try to benefit from him while he carried the entire group. Yizil questions him what was he even trying to say since it was Lee's abilities that got them through the mission. However, he starts yelling and says that he just got lucky with his scheming, and he just took the final blow when he already had it down low. She questions him if he was sure that he did not save him from almost dying, and as he started to think about what he did, he wondered if he had a skill that allowed him to change the level he shows and started to consider what if he actually made it back alive there. Jun-song expresses that he really hopes Lee is as good as Yizil was making it out to be because that way he would have at least the slight chance of making it back alive. She remembered when he said that he let everyone see it with their own eyes, and so she wipes her tears and states that she believed in him. She was sure that he would return safely, and Jun-song was sure of it as well. Meanwhile, Lee found himself in a different place, but he noticed that there were bodies of those kobolds from before, and it just felt really creepy. But putting that aside, he was actually thinking about voting for himself if things didn't work out. However, it was a good thing that everything seemed to be going his way as he looked at his guide. Although it seemed like he needed to have a little chat with Seong later as he was really pissed at him. Just then, he saw that the kobold tribe's hunting group had returned, and there were quite a bunch of them. Behind them was a really big one, and Lee's death mission was to kill that chieftain and the hunting group that were engaged by the death of their tribesmen. The boss monster was the level 12 kobold chieftain, and they all immediately started to attack him. The guide told him that just like the others, the chieftain was also weak to poison, so he brought out the poison apple and thought that a level 12 boss monster, on top of another monster, was nearly an impossible opponent. If it were anyone else, they would have accepted their fate. However, it was different since it was him, as he slashed all the fodder monsters with ease using his basic swordsmanship skill, combined with the poison from the apple. After dealing with all the side characters, the one that was left was the boss monster right in front of him, and he prepares himself to fight it head-on.